there's often a messy middle. There's a point in time where you're working really, really hard and you're investing in yourself. You're making a bet on yourself. And that's, I think, something that's not talked about enough. It feels like, you're an overnight success, but it's not. It's a lot of work to get there.
Welcome to Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host, Dr. Cynthia. With over 30 years in the corporate world as a single mom, cancer survivor, and often the only woman in the C-suite, I understand the balancing act high-achieving women face. Now an executive coach and international speaker, my mission is to embolden every woman in the C-suite or on the rise to claim her agency and challenge the norms holding her back. Tailored for ambitious professional women, this show features candid conversations with powerful business leaders sharing their real stories of success and failure. If you're ready to look up and step up, you're in the right place. Join us and invest in your future today. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I am your host and your coach, Dr. Cynthia. I am so excited about today's episode. It's a powerful one. And while we don't like to time these too much because these podcasts live into perpetuity, this is a special drop during Women's History Month. And I think it could not be more timely. We are joined by a leader today who's helping shape the future of executive coaching on a global scale. Jacquely Lane is the president of 100 Coaches Agency, which is an extraordinary community of the world's most iconic leadership thinkers and executive coaches. Named to Forbes 30 Under 30, can't lie, I'm a little jealous of that, and a recipient of the Coaches 50 Award from Thinkers 50, Jacquelyn stands at a rare intersection: system thinker, humanitarian, business leader, and relationship architect, all of which we're going to dive into. Today, we're going to explore what makes leaders coachable, how women can access rooms of influence without losing themselves, and what it really means to lead with both rigor and heart. So, Jacquelyn, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Cynthia.
Absolutely. Please call me Cynthia. We have been planning this for some time. You and I met virtually several months ago. I think it was summer, and you were expecting your first little one, and now she's 4 months old. How's the transition with motherhood and being back in the office going?
Oh, it's actually been so amazing. I really thought I was gonna feel divided by
Yeah.
having a little girl, like my time was gonna be a little more stretched, but I actually feel like it's the opposite. I feel expanded. I feel like I
Oh, I
can go a
love it.
lot deeper and I just have more to give. I mean, certainly there are trade-offs. I'm not saying,
Sure.
we can quite have it all, but it
Yeah.
has been the most rewarding journey, and I'm just amazed, at how fulfilling it is in the best way, both
Oh.
personally and professionally.
I love that. It definitely expands us in so many ways. And of course, you work in such a great organization with such amazing support around you and people that are really encouraging you to have that balance. With that in mind, I always love to start with sort of the origin story of what brought you here as the president of 100 Coaches Agency. What sort of led to this work for you?
Yeah, so I have been a longtime fan of the world of coaching and leadership development, but didn't really know how to access it. So I think, I've been very lucky to have good, I would call it who luck in my life. I've been able to meet some of the right people at some of those right moments and intersections in life. But I think my journey now, as I tell the story, can sometimes feel like it was linear. But to me, as I lived it, feels like it was very circuitous. And, all that to say, I started my career as an engineer, but, my parents really were pushing me to go into something with a hard skill, very practical, something you can fall back on. But the truth is, I always wanted to be a writer.
Mm.
I love people. Those are two things that as I look back on my life, have always been constant for me. And, I think I had a moment of clarity when the pandemic hit and I was working in corporate America, not really feeling fulfilled personally. I mean, I was feeling like I was growing as a person, but I wasn't really connected to the work I was doing. So I had this moment of clarity where I said, I think maybe now's as good a time as ever to take a little bit of a risk. And I remember putting in my 2 weeks, especially after I had a really interesting dream where I had kind of seen myself climbing the corporate ladder, and I saw myself 30 years later, and in
Oh,
that
wow.
dream, I'd made it. I was, like, in the wood-paneled office, and, I was, like, feeling like, "Oh, like, I'm here, I'm finally an executive," but then I caught my reflection in the window, and I didn't recognize myself.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a really scary moment for me, and I realized I think the thing that set me on this path, is no like, the values, the desire to make a positive impact and to make a difference, those things I had to sacrifice to get to this position, and now that I'm here, I no
Yeah.
longer care about those same things. And that was a
Yeah.
real moment of clarity for me where I realized I think I'm not on the right path. I'm climbing the ladder of success, but it's leaned against the wrong wall, and I need to figure out how to find the right wall.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
love that. I love the end of that. No, I love where you went with that in terms of the finding the right wall because it makes me think it's not that you made the choice that I no longer want to be successful or
No.
no longer want to grow or I no longer want to advance my career. What I hear you saying is the path that I was on was just the wrong path. I still want
Right.
those things. I just
Correct.
need to be on a completely different path. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
that's
I'm still the same
fantastic.
person. I'm still,
Yeah.
energetic and, achievement oriented, and I want to grow and I want to learn, but, maybe I'm not connected to my values or my work's not connected to my values, and
Mhm.
that was the kind of moment for me where I was like, "Okay, I need to make a change." I had no idea what that change would be. Like, I mean, let me, just say I hadn't had any time to look for alternative jobs. I was so deeply embedded in the work I was doing. Felt like I didn't have the time to do that. So I had to take a bit of a leap of faith and quit
Right.
my job without any sense of what was going to come next. Very fortunately for me, I have an amazingly supportive husband who, when I shared this like really deep conviction, he said, "Okay, I think you
Mhm.
have to do it." And I so appreciate that he let me take that leap because and it was roughly a month of me just trying to, like, sleep and recover. And then, lo and behold, maybe month later, a friend of a friend, I was talking to him and I said, "I'm so interested in leadership development and coaching." And he said, "Well, why don't you become a coach?" And I said, I don't really feel like I have the experience yet to become a coach, but I'm interested in coaching. But I want to do something that has, let's say, more scale. Because if I'm a coach, then I can only, let's say, maximum work with 10 to 20 leaders at a time. But how can I have an even bigger impact than that? And he said, "Actually, I think I have a friend that you need to meet." And that friend that I met is now my business partner, Scott Osman, and he shared a vision for creating the 100 Coaches agency. He and Marshall Goldsmith had already created the 100 Coaches community a few years prior, and I was already an enormous fan of Marshall, and I knew many of the people in the 100 Coaches community, at least through their work. I had read some of
Right.
their books and listened to them on podcasts, and I was a big believer in a lot of their content, knew that we were missionally aligned. And so I immediately caught the vision for creating a 100 Coaches agency. And I told Scott, I think I'm the person to help you build it. Luckily, he agreed. And here we are almost 6 years later. We've created an agency that we are so proud of. We match leaders at the most senior levels of business, family owned organizations, nonprofits and government with the right executive coach or advisor for them. It's
Right.
deeply meaningful work to me. I've gotten the opportunity not just to thank Marshall for the impact that his writing has had on my life and career, but I've now gotten to write a book with Marshall.
Yes.
So it's been amazing how just getting on the right path, the work has been, it's been challenging. It's been long hours, but it's never felt like work.
Yeah. There Oh my goodness, Jacqueline, there's so many things I want to unpack for the person listening because in so many ways, whether with intention or through intuition or some combination, you made so many pivotal and critical decisions and intentional actions. And I want to unpack them because I think that is so important. First of all, you felt out of alignment with your purpose. There was something off, right? Now, for the woman listening, I want to harken back to, in Now Near Next, for example, we talk about right out of the gate, we talk about boundaries first because women always say, well, I don't have time. So we have to cover time straight away. But the very second chapter is know your purpose, right? And so taking time to really understand your alignment, your values, not the values on your company's wall, not the values in the employee handbook, right? Not their mission, your mission.
Right.
What are those? And being really crystal clear about that. You were having this sort of intuition or vision that this feels out of alignment. And so what I would say to the individual listening is you may not be in a situation where you have the economic ability to quit your job when you have this epiphany that, ooh, something's misaligned. But what you do have is the ability to, with intentionality, start thinking about what is my pivot going to be and how do I start investing in that right now?
Mm.
Right.
Mhm.
So talk about and there's several other things. So I want to unpack so many things you did, but to tether that to coaching, talk about how coaches can help that individual that is feeling out of alignment get clear on their purpose.
Yeah, I found for myself that I was moving so fast in my corporate career that I really didn't even have time to reflect. And it wasn't until I engaged a coach who just created the space for me to take an hour every week or every other week to just pause, and
Right.
we can and just kind of let go of the stresses of the day and take a moment to really sit with myself, and who would ask me some of the important questions about what I really valued. And I think a part of the realization for me was realizing what I don't want. In some ways what you don't want can feel a little more clear than what you do want. And when I could look at my situation or the values that I felt were around me, I could see, oh, I'm not aligned with that actually. I'm not aligned with the idea of money is the ultimate end. I want to do something where I feel like I'm making a positive difference in the world. And it can be that simple. Um, and that was, I think, what started me on the path of
Mhm.
looking a little bit broader.
Yeah. And then the next thing you did that I want to point out is two things. I'm going to tie them together is with that as a backdrop, you really started to think about, well, what is it then? What isn't it, right? And so what is it? And I've had this you were sharing, I've had this fascination around coaching and leadership, et cetera. The important thing is that you put that aspiration into the universe. You
Mm,
spoke with a friend of a friend, right?
yes,
You reached out, you took the initiative, you were intentional about sitting down with somebody. And here's the beautiful thing for the person listening. People are not mind readers.
no,
That conversation allowed someone to say your name in rooms you're not in,
correct.
right? He was able to go, wait a minute, interesting. I think I know a guy
Yes,
that does that, right? And so that now that doesn't happen every single time, but the reality is your odds of those kinds of fortuitous connections happening go up exponentially if you tell people, right?
correct. And I think this really goes to what you talk about in Now Near Next as well, is about strengthening your connections, leaning on your community. None of us do it alone
Right.
is the reality. You don't, this a myth of self-sufficiency that I think is kind of common in Western culture.
Yeah.
And especially I think women either wait to be asked or tapped or, for someone to notice and kind of spontaneously reach out and ask them. But I think it takes a little bit of a bolder first step. And I wouldn't have found in my own life and career that it's actually the weak ties that are have some of the most interesting connections.
Mm,
It doesn't often come from my closest group of 10 or
right,
20 friends. It often comes from someone who's a little bit more peripheral in my life and often, like, they just connect me to they're connected to a different network in a different way. The people that are in my core group, we're already hearing a lot of the same things, but
yeah,
it's interesting, like, those weaker ties have been some of the most rich and rewarding for me, and I think similarly, I hope to be for them,
right.
that we interconnect each other in a more interesting and colorful way.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I hadn't thought about it that way before because, sometimes I find myself a little disappointed that my closest network aren't more helpful, right? Every now
Mm,
and then I'm like, gosh, you would think with the people that I'm connected to that they'd be more helpful. They would offer more in terms of helping to expand my business or whatever it is. And the reality is it's not that they're not thinking about me. They probably are, as I them. But they've saturated the connections that made sense, right?
correct.
It's those a little more distant. It reminds me, and we talk about this in Now Near Next. It reminds me of there were 2 or 3 women, happened to be women, there might have been a man in there somewhere, but, 2 or 3 women in particular that reached out to me when I was in my corporate career that I knew from a distance, right? They were part of the same company, but I didn't know them well. And they reached out and said, "Hey, I've been observing you." I had reached a level of the C-suite at that point, and they said, "Can I buy you coffee? Would you be open to just meeting for coffee? I'd love to just pick your brain on, how did you do it? How did you get to that role? I know you have now adult children, but obviously you've done this with children, et cetera." And, they were earlier in career. And fast forward, in every one of those cases, again, divine, fortuitous, serendipity, something would come up. I'd be in a committee meeting or in something, and they'd say, "We really need somebody on this team that does this or that." And I'd say, "You know what? I just had coffee with Esther 3 months ago, this gal who's over here, and she would love something like that," right? So don't minimize, number 1, the opportunity,
Mhm.
of those, and then take the initiative to
Yeah.
put your voice out there, which is exactly what you did, and to that point, it is sometimes those more removed. I hadn't thought about it in that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's you've probably experienced this too, I imagine. When you launch a book, it's often the weaker ties that are some of the biggest
Yes.
fans and advocates, and I've come to just stop having expectations of some of my close network because, again, I recognize, like, we have a very close relationship, and so they
Yeah.
probably they don't feel the same need, I mean,
Yes.
or desire, and that's totally fine. But as soon as I got rid of that expectation, it actually made the entire book launch process much more pleasant.
Yeah, I wish you had shared that with me a few months ago because I could have benefited from resetting my mindset in that regard. It was like, geez, why aren't they, leaning in more than and then these people that I barely know or I worked with 20 years ago are reaching out. You're right, absolutely. And I do want to dive into the book, but I think all of this is sort of tethering through. Um, the other thing that I think is so powerful, 2 things, I'll tie them together, is you mentioned that when you met with Scott, and of course you had known of Marshall's work, big fan of Marshall as well. He endorsed both my first and my second book, so I am very grateful to Marshall and his thought leadership. That you knew a lot of the people in the 100 Coaches community
Mhm,
because you had been following their thought leadership. And so I
correct.
think that's another point for the person listening is as you think about what is your next, even if you have to, you're doing your day job with excellence because you need to keep food on the table. But you're identifying what your next is. Start working on that today. And one of the ways to do that is connect with people through LinkedIn, make those, virtual connections, tell them that, follow them, see what they're talking about.
Mhm.
You were already doing that, which just furthered your ability to kind of invest yourself in that space.
Right, that's exactly it. I mean, there's so much content on the internet today and, so many books that are published and, in the wide world of content, what is it that you are drawn to? I think
Hmm.
that is in itself a very revealing thing. I mean,
Yeah.
because my algorithm is gonna be different from somebody else's, so what is it that resonates with me? There could be something there.
That's right. That's right. And then it just and there probably are many other points, but the last thing I want to just really put a shine a light on is you had self advocacy in that as you and Scott began to talk and you understood his vision and Marshall's vision, you said, I think I can help you do this. I think I can make this happen. And what we know, I know, is that all the data is clear that women over index on performance. We think we have to be,
Mhm.
great at everything. I wrote down that you said, I don't have any experience in this, right? You're
Right.
like, I haven't done this thing before. And yet, fast forward, as you sort of connected to the vision, it aligned with your sense of purpose, et cetera. You said, I think I could do this. Because I don't think that I don't think it's a just, hey, if you're listening, just go be a better advocate for yourself. I mean, just
Yeah.
stop being so humble. How maybe can a coach help
Mhm.
women move from this self deprecating or it doesn't feel humble to put it out there? And there is a difference between men and women. And I've studied
Sure.
it in terms of we struggle more because we are really conditioned to put our head down, work hard, and
Yep.
assume that somebody will tap us when they think we're ready.
Right. Yeah, this goes back to something my dad always said to me growing up, is he said, "The worst thing someone can say is no." You
Mm,
know, if no if that's the biggest risk you're taking is a no, guess what? That's a pretty low risk.
yeah,
It might sting for a moment,
right.
perhaps, but the upside is so much bigger than the downside. You might as well take a chance. And I will admit that that was an uncharacteristic moment of boldness for me to
Yeah.
say, I think I'm the person to help you build this. Uh, and I just decided my vision, my desire was bigger than my fear in that moment,
Oh,
and we tried things out again, like, before any contract is signed, before, I mean, we were building the agency, we didn't have any revenue, so there was no way to pay either of us, and
right.
so, part of it was, like, rolling my sleeves up, saying, "You don't have to pay me, let's just see if this goes somewhere and see if it's a fit," and, as time will obviously show, that was a really good choice and investment on my part.
Yeah. That makes me think about I love the comment, my decision was bigger than my fear. That your passion, your purpose to put yourself out there was bigger than your fear. That's incredible. I interviewed Gabrielle Schuster several months ago, and her episode has already dropped. One of the fascinating things she talked about was um, so again, I'm always sensitive to you may not be in a situation, right? The person listening might go, "Well, that's great, but I can't just do work for free. I'm, a single mom or it's just me or whatnot." But one of the things Gabrielle said, tethering again to exactly what you're saying is she would be working in her day job
Mhm.
and she would see that she really wanted to be able to make a lateral move over to another department because she thought that would be really great for her growth. So she would go over to that department head and say, what is what on your priority list? What is something that you can't get to that's important to you, but just, you don't have the bandwidth? And could I take that on as an extracurricular, project? Let me help you with that.
Mhm.
And so she was still doing her day job, but she
Right.
was helping in another department do something out of scope of her responsibilities connecting with another department, building trust and credibility with another leader, et cetera, that just she would plant these seeds to sort of navigate her growth. And it's like what you were saying. Sometimes you have to put yourself in positions that allow you to build that,
Yeah.
demonstrate, and open up those doors. So there's lots of ways to get there.
Certainly, and I recognize that I'm was in a hugely privileged situation to be able to do that, and I this is what I love about side hustles, is
Yes.
you can start a side hustle while still earning an income doing your whatever is your day job, and in that time, you're experimenting and testing the market to figure out, "Is there a fit here? Is there a
Yes.
business model that makes sense? Is there a way where I can make this my primary income?" And sometimes the answer is no, and I think that's also a really big part of the entrepreneurial journey that people don't talk about nearly enough, that a
Right?
big part of finding a business model is failing.
Yes.
Innovation requires failure. That's just kind of the nature of it. And so again, as you said, like having something that's kind of the safety net so that you can run those experiments until you find the thing that fits is really a great idea.
I just did a post recently, a LinkedIn post recently on side hustles. Also a huge fan. And, some people worry and there's some reason to feel caution around this, right? I didn't find that my employer at the time was super embracing of the fact that I was getting my executive coaching certification and I was doing coaching for a very nominal fee so that I could get the hours, the credits and so on. There's sort of a question of loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. But I will tell you, when you work for a great organization with a great leader, um, and I say this all the time, it's really not your company's business. As long as you're doing your day
Mhm.
job with excellence, not their business. So I think you're right. Side hustles. My PR marketing manager has a full-time job. Her company's very supportive, but her side hustle is, managing my brand. And she has a couple of other clients and she works like crazy, but she loves it because someday she might want to be able to do that as a full-time gig. She's sort of seeing how that fits, which is a great way to test it out, to your point.
Exactly. Well, and my father-in-law did this as well. This is a long time ago. He was a financial advisor by day, and then he became like a comic book dealer by night, like doing like really cool, very old, like 50s and 60s original
Neat.
Spider-Man and Superman and all those type comics, because he was really into those kind of comics and collectibles when he was a kid. And so he started doing that on the side and like going to Comic-Con back when Comic-Con was just about comics and not about
Right.
cosplay.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like, the funny thing is, so he was building this business on the side and realized this is making more money doing this side business than his primary business, so eventually he left, and then, with lo and behold, the Marvel movies have come out, and now his business is, doing better than it's ever done, so it's pretty amazing, but it
That
started
is
as a side hustle.
I love that. That is such a great story. Yeah, so if you got something, if you like to knit or coach or draw or, who knows, marketing, graphic design, photography, I mean, all of those things can follow those passions and see if that natural talent is something that ultimately you can monetize. Sometimes it just gives us an outlet. It gives us an outlet for doing the job that, we maybe have to do for a period of time because we have some kind of a retention bonus or, something that's sort of keeping us there that makes sense for
Mhm.
whatever reason. But we need that outlet. That's why I wrote my
Yeah,
first book. I was feeling restless, uncomfy, and I thought I need something outside my 50 to 60 hours a week that just fills me in a different way,
totally.
and then look where it led. So you
Totally.
never know.
Yeah, but I think you make a great point there, which is there's often a messy middle. There's a point in time where you're
Yes.
working really, really hard and you're investing in yourself, you're making a bet on yourself. And that's I think something that's not talked about enough. It feels like, you're an overnight success, but it's not. It's a
No.
lot of work to get there.
Yes, it's a lot of work. I think all the social media and social channels can make something look so polished and so put together and so successful. I remember when early in, I've only been at this for a couple years, and early in, I had some pretty good, marketing and social media buzz, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, you're everywhere. Your businesses just must be taking off and this and that." And I thought, well, I'm not in the black yet, but I'm glad it looks really good on the outside. I'm making it look really good. So yeah, what fake it till you make it, I guess, and to some degree. I think that's a really good pivot opportunity to talk about your book, Becoming Coachable, that you co-authored with Marshall. There's so many important elements that I think are critical for the person listening, and I absolutely recommend having it in hand. Um, talk about you talk about relationships first
Mhm.
in terms of becoming coachable. Start there. I just sort of unpack some of the key takeaway points that I think, particularly for women who need to stop and invest in themselves and make time, would benefit from hearing.
Yeah. I think so. The value of relationship first was something that emerged pretty early in the creation of the 100 Coaches agency. Is we realized we didn't want to prioritize transactions, that
Mm,
the biggest and most important thing to us is that the relationships be well served and be in the right place. And we consider anyone we meet to be someone that we are in relationship with. But that was and again, that is just what feels most true, certainly to Scott and I, and we realized that was a value that we wanted to have everywhere through the 100 Coaches agency. And that actually has infused our entire Matchcraft process where we pair leaders and coaches together. It's a priority on the relationship first. And that, of course, now has really come through and been a key pillar of the process of writing, becoming coachable, of launching the book. That's kind of infused throughout. Is when the relationships are right, things are in the right place.
mm,
Things seem to work out. And I think we all intuitively know when a relationship is not in the right place.
yeah.
But at least for me, the thing that if I'm having any tension in a relationship, that's probably the thing that keeps me up at night more than any other thing. So,
Hmm.
I think that's something that I feel really deeply connected to. And ultimately, the process of being coached is all about a trusted partnership and relationship. And when you find that right partnership, there's really no limit to what a
Hmm.
leader can accomplish. And if the partnership's not right, if you don't have that ability to be totally candid and to have that really trusted relationship, it's going to be hard. And so
Absolutely.
our book is kind of a guide about not only how do you find that right partnership, but ultimately how do you engage in that partnership in the right way. I think there are a number of books. We were realizing this when we started the process of writing the book. There are a lot of books written about how to either show up like a coach, leader shows up like a coach for their team or their organization, or some books about here's how you become a coach and start your own coaching practice. But there were not a lot of books, or I mean, to my knowledge, I didn't, maybe one, on the idea of coachability. How do you actually
Hmm.
receive coaching effectively so that you can go as far as you want to and need to go? And so that was a bit of our exploration, and it was very fun to write it.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think what did you find in your research is the biggest barrier to individuals being coachable? Because I remember going through my certification a couple of years ago, and the gentleman that was doing a lot of the training said not everybody's coachable, and you need to recognize. And I've had at least one client who, I was when the engagement was over, I did not attempt to invite them to continue because they were not coachable. But what did you find in the research that was the biggest barrier?
So, if I could put it most simply, w it's y it's a combination of 2 skills that you have to have,
Okay.
and it's you have to be humble enough
Mm,
to receive feedback, humble enough to engage in the process and to believe that you can be better. And you have to be confident enough to believe that you can make a change. and that it can stick and that you can get to where you want to go. And if you're lacking either humility or confidence, it can be really unproductive to try to be coached because you either see someone who's I'm always right, I don't have an issue, I don't need to change, or I don't those people who are giving me feedback don't know what they're talking about. There's some of that like lack of humility, or it's
Right.
the lack of confidence. Oh, I don't know. I'm just a small person in a big machine. I don't, woe is me. And, it's kind of
Right.
this, or that will never work. I've tried that and that didn't work, and they always shoot things down.
Yeah.
So those are the, if I had to put it the most succinctly, that's it. And then in our book, we talk about the framework really for becoming coachable is you have to be open to change, open to taking feedback, open to taking action, and then open to being held accountable. And again,
Oh,
any one of those are issues where that can break down. But even those four, I think, boil into that idea of humility and confidence.
yeah, I love those. Say those again. Open to taking feedback. Was that number one?
Open to making a change.
Making a change. So you have to be open to the possibility of making the change in the first place.
Correct. And that's where I find some people, it's dead on arrival right there. They're not, they say, "Oh, the
Yes.
issue's not me. The issue is everyone around me."
Right.
Isn't that a really
Right.
interesting perspective? I'm like, "Oh, maybe coaching's not going to work for you." Uh, the
Yes.
second piece is that then you have to be open to receiving some feedback, and that can be feedback from the
Right.
coach about, "Hey, I think when you said that, I was feeling this, or this is the way that
Right.
that comes off to me." Or, a lot of coaches will do a 360 assessment where they're asking key stakeholders in a person's life about them. And if they're not open to hearing some of that feedback and the way that they're showing up, the way they're being perceived, again, not going to be very effective. And
Right.
then the next part is then you have to take action on that feedback. Because if you just hear it and you say, "Thanks for the feedback, I appreciate you," but you keep living your life in exactly the same way,
Yeah.
then, you're also not gonna see the change that you wanna see. So
That's right.
action is where the rubber meets the road. And then finally, and this is one of the hardest parts for me personally, but I also think the most valuable part of coaching is that a coach is someone who's gonna hold you accountable. Have
Hmm.
you had that hard conversation that you're putting off?
Right.
Are you actually going to live in alignment with the way that we've been talking about? And the easy things, everyone who decides to get a coach is probably a highly motivated person.
That's right.
Right? And so the easy things they will have done, even the medium things they will have done, some of the hard things they will have done, but the things that are really hard or uncomfortable where you have to look in the mirror or take an action that you are not excited about, that's where
Right.
accountability makes all the difference.
Absolutely. That is an amazing summary. It's funny, just when I think about humble humility and confidence, sometimes I find this is the social psychologist in me that that appearance of lack of humility really stems from a deep lack of confidence. Right.
Mm,
So it's I'm over I'm putting forth this sort of vibrato because really I don't feel confident and it feels like you're going to see my cracks in my armor.
yes.
But I think that those are amazing. Our time has literally flown by. One of the things I want to make certain that our listeners hear is that the 100 Coaches Agency, you predominantly have company paid clients, right, that want to invest in their amazing talent and the potential. But if a woman listening is saying, "Gosh, all of this really resonates with me. I would love the opportunity to have a coach that could really help me work on my confidence or help me put my, be more um, self-advocacy, etc." One of the things I love about your model is that it really is customizable and that it's so the cost of it varies,
Mhm.
the matching is really customized, and quite frankly, would it be unheard of if a woman listening might call to seek out more information that they can then go back to their employer or their boss and say, "I would really benefit and value this. Can we make a connection?" Does that happen?
Absolutely. Oh, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to our value as a relationship first company, where we want to be a resource and a friend to anybody who is thinking about coaching and wants this to be a part of their story and their journey. So, our entire matchcraft process of pairing a leader with, some of the coaches that we think would be a great fit for them, that whole process is free of charge. There's no commitment or obligation at all until the point where you ultimately select a coach. And so we always, talk upfront about what's the investment that you feel comfortable making. And I will say that this is often a conversation we have, particularly with women, is that we really strongly believe the company should be paying for your development.
Uh-huh.
If you are someone who is contributing to the company, a high potential leader, someone who's making a difference in your organization, then again, the benefit for them retaining you, developing you, and helping you get to the next level, the benefit is primarily with the company. They are going to financially benefit from you being a more effective leader. Um, and so again, like that's a conversation that we have coached many women to have with their company and their organization. We could certainly talk about that, but everything we do is very bespoke to the leader's unique situation and needs. We're very lucky to have a pool of roughly 100 coaches, as our name suggests,
Yes.
and they do work in a variety of industries. Some of them are very passionate about working with high potential leaders or nonprofit leaders. So we can certainly do our matchcraft process and introduce someone to some amazing coaches, whatever their situation may be.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love that. And this will be in the show notes if you're driving or on a walk or what have you. 100coaches.com is the website where you can fill out the form, the inquiry form. Be sure to pick up Becoming Coachable. It's available everywhere quality books are sold. Want to end with this question. I'm big about intentionality. And so,
Mm,
what would be one small thing, Jacqueline, you would invite the woman listening to start doing with intention today?
mm, mm. I have found that we are so afraid of feedback. It's kind of when someone says, "Can I give you some feedback?" Often we have this like visceral reaction.
Exactly.
Marshall has this great framing that I love. He calls it feed forward because it's not about something you did wrong in the past. It's about what can you do better in the future.
Mm,
And so the simple practice of asking someone in your life, it could be a close friend, a spouse, a colleague, just say, "Hey, listen, I would love to hear, quick 2 minutes conversation does not have to be long. What is your feed forward, your advice for me? How can is there something that I'm doing that's negatively impacting me or holding me back? What would you recommend for me if you were in the driver's seat in my life?"
yeah.
And it's amazing some of the incredibly kind-hearted feedback and advice that people give. So many wonderful suggestions have come out of that for me. It has been a powerful process. It literally takes 2 to 5
Yeah.
minutes, and it genuinely can change your life, and believe me, starts making the process of feedback, it changes the relationship, and I have for me, has started seeing it as a gift and not
Great.
something to be afraid of.
Oh my goodness. I am putting that on my to do list today. I am going to take your advice and find at least one person to give me feed forward and take those couple of minutes to see how I can just improve, grow, get out of my own way. Jacqueline, this has been delightful. You are just a wealth of knowledge. Your own story is a living example of intentionality and betting on yourself. And so I'm so delighted that we have the opportunity to sort of unpack not only your story, but learn all the good work that you're doing with
Mhm.
100 Coaches Agency. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Cynthia. This has been such a delightful conversation. I'm a huge fan of your work. I feel like we're so deeply aligned, and this has just been such a fun conversation. Actually, all of our conversations have been fun, and I know we'll have many more.
Many more, absolutely. And for the person listening, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your gift of time, or your privilege of sharing time with us. This was all about intentionality. That growth doesn't happen by accident. Take time, invest in you, start working on your future today with intention. A coach is a great place to start. Until next time, you've got this. Congratulations on choosing to invest in yourself. I know your time is precious. Thank you for spending it here with me. I believe in helping you look up, step forward, and fully realizing your potential. If today's conversation resonated, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate and comment on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you know someone who would benefit, please share this episode with them. Let's stay connected. Visit me at dr-cynthia.com, and you can find me on all the socials at Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Until next time, remember, boldly start working on your future today.